Once upon a time, there was a kid named Andy who loved sailing. Andy read and reread a book about a guy who sailed all the way around the world. He thought, how amazing would that be? Andy grew up to have a great life with some amazing children he wanted to be an example for, and he built a fulfilling career serving others, coaching Olympians and some of the greatest athletes in the world, coaching college students and young entrepreneurs and business people and teachers and fellow coaches. Over the more than 3 decades of Coach Andrew's career, he's had an incredibly positive impact on thousands of lives, all while helping people achieve their dreams. Now, Andrew is embarking on a dream of his own, sailing around the world in the Clipper Round the World race. 42,000 miles, 11 months sailing the globe, sailing into port on 6 of the world's 7 continents. It's the adventure of a lifetime, young Andy's dream manifested by Andrew's ongoing belief and positive mindset. Where in the world is Andrew Moss? Let's find out. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, Kay. Nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too.
For real.
We're in the same room.
We are. How crazy is that?
It is like insane. I'm not adjusted to it yet, to be perfectly honest.
Yes, everybody tells me that when they meet me for the first time.
Yeah. Well, because we've known each other for a really long time. Mm-hmm. Not only is this the first time that I'm seeing you in the race, it's the first time I'm ever meeting you in person.
That's right. Yeah, it's exciting. And I think the first time we saw each other, you were peering down to the inside of the sailboat, and I was messing around in the galley doing something.
That's right. You were trying to figure out where to put all the frozen stuff.
That's right. All the food we were packing onto the boat for the next race. So,
well, and where in the world are we right now?
Well, we are in the very interesting city of Washington, D.C., and east coast of the United States, and a couple hundred miles inshore or inland from the coast. So it's kind of cool when you look at where we are on Google Maps. It looks like the boats are all sitting on land, but we're way up the Potomac River and moored right in the heart of D.C., and it's a pretty cool place to be.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, so I walked to get to the boats. I walked across, the Supreme Court, the Capitol building, the Grant Memorial. I could see the Washington Monument in the distance, and I just was blown away by where we are. Mm-hmm. I have been to Washington once, but I was so little. I don't remember it really. And it was like a 1-day stop, or an afternoon stop or something. So I did, for people listening, I did see the flags and the pennants of the boats, and I just started to cry happy tears. I was like, this is it's real. It's a real thing.
It is a real thing. Yeah. I think I was telling you yesterday that, the way we organized ourselves maybe 50 miles or so before getting to D.C., all the boats got together and we formed a line. And so we motored the last 50 miles, within 1 or 2 boat lengths of each other.
Wow.
And that certainly garnered a lot of interest from people who live along the river and up the coast. And then certainly coming into D.C. and the wharf area where we're moored is a very busy restaurant and bar and sort of live music scene. So it's been a fun venue to be in, to have those boats. Lots of curiosity about what we're up to. And lots of questions. The lineups and queues for the boat tours have been as long as anywhere in the world. So it's been a really, really great stop. First time the race has ever come to D.C.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think the only other place, I think once it went to Halifax, and then the rest of the time have been around New Jersey, New York area. Oh. So this is a big step, and the local folks that brought the race here have put on a great show and really made us feel like special, which in a city like Washington's, not that easy to do because there's so many cool things to do.
Yeah. What was happening with the flag? There were flags on the boat yesterday. Can you talk about that a little bit when I was there?
Yeah, so we had a crew member, Sean Jones, who's from the Washington area, and he came up with the idea of putting together a gift for our skipper and AQP, Mike and Lottie. that was the American flag that was flying the day we left Portsmouth on September 3rd. So he got the actual flags.
The American flag that was flying
here in D.C.
The
day that we left Portsmouth.
Do I remember
September
that it was
3rd.
flying like on the Capitol building? Is that?
I think so. Yes,
Yeah,
on the Capitol.
yeah,
Sorry, on the
yeah.
Capitol building. Yes. So he through his senator was able to get the flags and then have them folded in sort of military style and put into a beautiful casing. So he gifted those to Mike and Lottie this week, and it was really, really moving and meaningful gift, from one of our crew. Sean did the around Australia leg.
Oh, interesting. He lives here.
He lives here. Yep.
So sometimes it feels like people get on the boat to go to take the leg that will bring them back to where they're from. Sometimes they take the leg, they start where they live and they go somewhere else, and then they like go home off the boat. And then apparently some people start and end where they don't live at all.
Yeah. Sean had a very busy life going on with work, and then I think his fourth child was due, so he needed to schedule himself around a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I think, that was leg 4. So around Australia. It's one of the more unique legs because there's very few people that actually sail around the bottom of Australia like we did. So you're in a part of the ocean that not many people go to, and it ended up being quite a stormy and windy leg as well. So he got his money's worth for sure on that experience. But he's had great energy. He's brought it in the training and to the boat. So it was cool to see him have a chance to sort of show off his city here. And
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I had been thinking there was something else that this was all making me think of, but it's kind of gone. So that's okay. Maybe it'll come back. Take us into this so we last spoke to you in Panama.
Yes.
And now we're here. So start off in Panama, if you would.
Yeah. Well, so I think we talked before we had gone through the canal. So we did the Panama Canal, which was a very cool experience. That was definitely something that for a lot of us, it was one of the big draws about this part of the race was to see that. I think it's called the 8th wonder of the world, the Panama Canal. So that was cool. Yeah, we were rafted with another one of our boats, the boat from Zhuhai, and the two of us went through with a big container ship. And it's a full day crossing to go from the Pacific side to the Atlantic side. But it's quite moving. I mean, you leave the Pacific and you climb about, I think, 4 locks up, and then you are in a lake that sort of has become an artificial lake that was made by the damming of some of the rivers around when they were constructing the canal. And then you make your way down the other side, and when they open that last gate, it's the Atlantic Ocean in front of you. And for I think for those of us doing around the world, it was sort of like almost unexpected, emotional moment because it kind of meant we were going home,
Yeah.
And it's been a long journey, and to sense that we were in the final ocean that we had to cross, it meant a lot. It was very cool.
I remember you saying that about Seattle, getting to Seattle. I remember you saying, because you would have just crossed the big Pacific cross. I remember you saying something like, it isn't, there's still a long way to go after, but this will feel like a big accomplishment. Yeah.
And I mean, I think people don't really look at this leg that we just did from Seattle to Washington for what it is. I mean, we were at sea 54 days, I think, between Seattle and Washington. We had a little break in Panama, but that's the longest leg of the whole race by a long way in terms of days. So it's typically not rough weather, and so it's just long, hot, slowish sailing. But it takes a long time. It is a long way from Seattle to Washington by sailboat.
It's like you described it as riding a bike if you were riding a bike.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't go much faster than you could ride a bike.
Yeah.
And so getting this behind us now, it's a huge chunk of the race that doesn't really get the sort of the accolades for being super dangerous or hard or cold or whatever, but it's a long slog. And I think we're glad it's over. But the race itself was actually really good. We started a couple 100 miles into the Caribbean Sea away from the Panama coast just to get into the start of where there's typically trade winds that blow. And sure enough, there were good winds, and we sailed the Caribbean, I think, in about 6 or 7 days from south to north. We went right through between Cuba and Haiti. There's a windward passage gap there that we went right through, and then made our way through the islands. And we had some choices in how the race was set up of which way to go, and so the boats all sort of chose their path. And then we got into sort of the southern part of or out of the Caribbean into the Atlantic.
Okay, you know what's really fun about being in person too is we can be like, hey, wait a sec.
Sure.
Because I'm just remembering something that happened.
Mm-hmm.
One morning I woke up and there was no one on the map.
On the race viewer.
Yes. What was that about? Everybody was gone.
Yeah. Well, so for those that maybe haven't followed us closely, there's a web-based tool that allows you to follow the boats in almost real time. It's like an hourly update, so that can be, I think they turn it down to even 15-minute updates as we get close to the finish line sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so our friends and family can follow along and see where the boats are, see the weather that we're getting. So one of the skippers sent an email out suggesting that it would be really fun if, as we entered the sort of area where there's a lot of islands and a lot of decisions to make, that it would be really fun to turn for everybody to go into stealth mode so that we wouldn't be able to see where the other boats were for 24 hours.
Wow.
And I think that was her main motivation, not to frustrate all the people at home.
Oh, it wasn't frustrating. It was magical.
Yeah.
I just want to, sorry.
Yeah. Well, we heard that afterwards, that people were like relieved to have 24 hours off from having to wake up and check their computer. But what was cool is it allowed the boats to make some decisions on different paths to take. And none of us could see what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so it actually created a really fun suspense to those 24 hours to see what the boats had done and where they had gone. And then it gave our family and friends a day off from worrying about following along. So
it was interesting because I remember having the thought, because it said, eventually I figured out that you were all in stealth mode. And I was like, did they do it on purpose?
They definitely did it on purpose. And kudos to, I think it was Inika from Perseverance, excuse me, who initiated it. But to get everybody on board was impressive because apparently it's been tried before, but nobody has ever gotten all the skippers to agree to do something like that. So, I think for everybody there was a benefit to it in the sense that whether they chose to do something different tactically or not, there'd be this 24-hour window where it was going to be fair and equal for everybody to not know what was going on. Mm-hmm. And it was an interesting part of the race where there was a lot of potential for change to happen. So
this was another thing that I was curious about, was like you're among all these islands, you're making all these decisions, and you actually couldn't physically see any of the other boats?
We could see from time to time maybe one or two other boats. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a completely stealth mode because in real life we could see each other. And we also have a navigation system that protects us from, running into ships and islands and things. So if any of the boats were within about 10 miles of us, we could see them on our navigation system. But anything outside of that, we couldn't see the other boats. But the interesting thing, and a lot of people were surprised to hear this, that the Caribbean, if you look at it on a chart or on a map, it looks like there's like so many islands all packed into this small space. We went through the Caribbean and didn't see any land at all.
Wow.
So it was probably a week from the time we got close to the Haiti, Cuba entrance, and we didn't see either of those islands. And to come out on the top end past Bahamas and north of that, we didn't see anything.
Wow.
So, I mean, visibility at sea is usually about 10 to 15 miles on a like best case day. Most days it's more like 5 to 7 miles. So we were never that close to land. So we everybody was kind of curious because we were all excited to, there's people who wanted to get internet signal from the Bahamas or from Cuba or whatever. Like, we didn't get anything. So it was just like sailing blindly in a lot of ways. And then stealth mode made it even more so that way.
Yeah. Well, I have some questions, but we'll save them for after because I want to let you keep going with this, and then we have some questions from the Facebook group too.
Yeah, so I mean, the last part of the race, sort of from exiting the Caribbean and then going through the Atlantic up to DC, was there was a big storm that we saw come across Florida that dumped a lot of rain on Florida, and it was sort of circling its way up the coast. It wasn't a hurricane or a tropical storm, but it had similar features to it. And what we try to do in those cases is get over to those storms and get to the correct side of them for the direction that the wind is circling around, because that gives us a little boost performance-wise. So a lot of us were able to catch the tail end of that, and we got a lot of rain and a lot of squalls and sort of wild weather. But with that came some pretty good winds, and then as what typically happens with a big storm is you have the wind that the storm generates often also creates sort of voids around that, and so you end up with wind holes outside of the storm. So it was this weird mix where you would go from like crazy windy to absolutely nothing and then back and forth again. So it was a really interesting racing, because we would do like 50 miles in 6 hours, and then the next time we would do like 10 miles in 6 hours. And we would look like we were zooming up the leaderboard, and then all of a sudden we'd come to a standstill and other boats would zoom up. So it wasn't really clear how it was all going to play out, but we did pretty well. We were sort of sitting in the middle of the pack and moved our way up to 6th at one point. I think we ended up finishing 7th overall, which is about where we probably deserved to be given sort of the way the race unfolded. We were never really much higher than 6th. But it was an interesting race, lots of different weather, lots of lead changes and, different things going on within the fleet. So it made it, there was definitely stuff to keep your attention the whole way through. Yeah.
Kind of fun. And there is this thing, I'm not sure if we've ever even defined this on the show, but there's a thing called a Le Mans start. And then that's an offshore start. And then I noticed that when you ended way off the coast. Like you then, went up the Chesapeake Bay up to Washington, D.C., right? So like is there a name when a race finishes offshore?
No, they basically set a finish line using two virtual markings or, GPS points. So we just, chart that on our navigation system so we can see where the virtual line is that we're going through. So that's sort of a virtual finish line is what we use offshore. It's very, I'm not sure if maybe at the very end of the last race before we get to Portsmouth, we might have an actual finish line, but most of the time it's a virtual one, because you don't want, when we have a real finish line, there's actually people that are sitting in a boat waiting for all the boats to cross the line.
Oh.
And, in a lot of these races, it can be well over a day between the first boat and the last boat. So it's not very practical to ask somebody to sit out there for the whole time. So yeah, the Le Mans start is sort of all the boats line up in a line and sail for 10 minutes at a controlled speed, and then and they all have to have the same sails up during that time.
Okay.
So it's meant to try to create a 10-minute window where the boats all have an opportunity to be sort of equal and get away and get started. And then after 10 minutes, the boats can do whatever they want and change course and change sails. So it's a unique way to do a start, but it is seemingly a pretty fair way when we're out in the middle of nowhere, as we tend to be.
Yeah. There was, I think it was in China, there was a really good description of it. And all the skippers sort of comment, maybe they do this every time and I just happened to miss it, but all the skippers were commenting on that the person who led did a great job, because the skippers switch around as to who starts which of those, or who leads,
correct,
makes decisions. And it was just interesting to hear about we were over there on that end and this was what was happening there, and we all tried to do this, the same thing, and when we left and we switched to this sail, and that, which brings up a question. Do I remember correctly that in this race from Panama to Washington, there was some sort of sail snafu or something like that had to do with the sail?
Yeah. Well, I think almost every race we've had a snafu of some sort with the sails. But yeah, we destroyed one of our spinnakers about midway through the race, or maybe towards the end. Time is a funny thing on the boat. I lose track of where we were. But it must have been towards the end, because we realized we didn't have enough time to try to fix it on the boat. So we just left it in a pile and dealt with it when we arrived.
Destroyed is a big word too.
Yeah. Well, we thought it was destroyed as it was flogging around up by the mast, and it was nighttime. So it was sort of an all hands on deck situation. So the off watch woke up, got their life jackets on, came up to try to help. And all you could see were these holes through the spinnaker where there shouldn't have been holes.
Oh my God.
So yeah, it had the wind had picked up quite quickly, and they had a hard time holding the boat on course, and the sails trimmed. So the sails were flogging a lot, and then the wind got so strong that basically what we think happened is the lines, the ropes that are attached that we control the sail with, actually snapped, which is a very rare thing with the ropes that we use on the boat. They tend to be very, very strong, but in this case they broke, and the sail was not really, we didn't really have a way to recover the sail. So some quick thinking by some of the crew, we came up with a way to attach a line to one end of the sail and then pull it in and get it down eventually. But it had, incurred some serious damage by that point. But thankfully, when we got to shore, we had about 10 crew per day assigned to work on the sail. And within the first 2 days, we were able to assess the damage, tape the sail back together, literally using a sail tape material.
Wow.
And then sew it on the second day, and pack it back up, and it seems like it's ready to go. So I think we escaped on that one fairly well. Cool. Then we had one other sail get damaged that also is being repaired, and I think it's back on the boat today. So we're in good shape.
Cool. I wonder if there would be pictures of what the sails look like at the start of this race and what they look like at the end. Yeah,
I hope there. Well, we have some great pictures of the boat as we left Portsmouth from the drones and helicopters. So I know we have those, and I do hope they take some photos at the end, because there are coffee stains. I mean, when the sails are, especially the spinnakers, when we take the spinnakers down, they're massive, massive sails.
Mm.
So they fill all the hallways from the bow of the boat to the stern, and both hallways are full of the sail.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then we basically have a way that we roll the sail back up to get it ready to go up again. But while it's lying on the ground, people are still going about their work. And yeah, one lady was on hydration duty, which is sort of getting everybody their coffee and tea and water and stuff. And something happened, and the hot chocolate container, the lid came off in her hands, and hot chocolate went flying everywhere. So the spinnaker's got this huge hot chocolate stain in it, and lots of coffee stains, and lots of places where it's been tromped on with dirty feet and whatever else.
Gosh.
So, yes, it would not be a good advertisement for the sailmaker to see those sails at the end. Plus, all the ones that have been damaged have sort of like Frankenstein
That's what I was thinking
stitching in them. Yeah,
I was thinking about is the name Jerry Cheever? Is he goalie, right?
Yeah.
Hockey goalie, and
Yeah,
he was maybe the first one to wear a face mask. I feel like, and he had he every time he got a puck to the face, he would have it stitched.
That's right.
Where he would have needed stitches.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. It's
And
a famous mask.
It's making me It's making me feel like
our sails.
I'd love to see that sail at the end.
Yeah, our sails will definitely have some stories to tell at the end of this race.
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And here you are, and then you were like in the Seattle to Panama race, the PSP Logistics took third place.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant that, well, I don't know, does everybody go to the prize givings all the time or like?
Yeah, I mean, typically, sometimes we're doing crew changeovers, but typically the prize giving is before the new crew have arrived.
Mm-hmm.
But we were ahead of schedule coming into Washington because of the weather. I think we were probably almost 2 days earlier than probably expected. So the day that they had scheduled for the prize giving ended up being that we had the new crew and the existing crew all there. So everybody got to enjoy that. And nice to get recognized, nice to be back on the stage to get our pennant. But, it's interesting because as the race has gone along, I think getting those awards has become less, not less important, but less of a focus. It's like, are we sailing to our abilities? Are we working hard throughout the race? I think everybody realizes there's a lot of chance and luck in terms of the weather. And then some of the boats just flat out seem to be faster than other boats,
like dimensionally, or like the way they're all made the same, right?
Yeah, it's hard to know what's contributing to it. Some of the boats have had much smaller crew sizes. So like we had, I think we had 19 people on the last crew, I think. Yeah. And some of the boats only had like 14 or 15.
Wow.
And so, if you take the weight of the people plus less food and just less gear and all that, in light wind, that can make a significant difference. Mm-hmm. And we're not really sure what's contributing, but there's boats that for the last few races have just seemed to have, 1/10 of a knot faster than everybody else all the time. And we haven't been able to figure out where that's coming from yet.
What that is about,
so.
yeah. Well, it's interesting, too, because I think about you're always wanting to perform at the best that you possibly can. It's cool and fun and interesting, the things that happen to make the boat go faster, the way that you do that all. And it's not, well, I guess it's curious to me, but not a surprise maybe that like, you do enough prize givings, I suppose. And it's a wonderful part of the race, but it feels like the sportsmanship of it, or the, maybe that's the wrong terminology, the competitive, you are now a fleet, not a bunch of boats racing against each other is kind of that's how it's felt to me as a spectator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's, for those of us that have been on all the races, the prize giving is different now. It's it's a great recognition for the boats that have performed well in the most recent race. But it's, I remember in race 2 when we came third, that, there was an excitement, like it was like a validation that we were going to be one of the best boats and, and all that. And then, you quickly see the way the fleet has evolved. In fact, the boats that have won the last 2 races were in last and second last place at the start of the race overall. So, I think we just realize it's just a moment in time. But for the new people joining the boat, it's a great, there's great energy and great excitement to getting a chance to, win a pennant and get their picture taken and all that. But it is, I think as we get closer to the end, it is much more about having done this whole journey and much more about that than it is about the individual race result.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, more on that a little later, I feel like. We have some questions from your sister.
Excuse me.
Sorry. Do you have anything else, any other thoughts on the race before we jump into questions?
No. I mean, if anybody was following along, there was some blogs written by, I think the skipper or Lottie wrote some blogs about the rain that we got and the weather that we got. And certainly one of the highlights for me on this race was going through some pretty spicy weather and helming the boat. But maybe that'll come up in the questions. So we'll see.
Well, actually, I don't know. Take us there. I mean, I feel like, tell me about that.
Well, yeah, so this was, I think it was in the last week of the race, in the last 4 or 5 days, actually, that weather system from Florida came through. And we had a span of about 12 hours where it was very, very windy the whole time. Lots and lots of hard driving rain. Pretty miserable for the most part to be on deck. The only saving grace was it was warm. The rain was warm, so it was nice. Mm-hmm. People had a chance to shower and get themselves clean with some rainwater. So people were excited about that. But it was sort of unrelenting. And one evening on I think it was the 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift we were on, and the wind had picked up quite a bit. And so I started off on the helm just to see how the conditions were before handing it over to somebody else. And it quickly escalated. And at one point for about 15 to 20 minutes, we had 45 to 52 knot winds, which definitely would be on the sort of hurricane, tropical storm scale of things. Sheets of rain sideways, and we had way too big a sail up at the time.
Because a big sail would...
Because earlier we had... The wind was sort of fluctuating, so we would have our big sails up because it lets us go faster when they're up, when the wind was down. But then, the wind changed very quickly, and we didn't really have time to change the sails. So we were overpowered. And it was a situation where, as the helm, and Mike and Lottie were sort of it was right when they were switching. It was around midnight because they switch who's on at around midnight. Mm-hmm. So neither one of them was on deck, and this wind hit us. And the guy we usually have somebody who is standing beside the helmsperson just as a backup and a safety, and also to help provide information on some of the readouts of the wind speed or the wind direction or what have you. So we were going through that, I didn't feel comfortable asking any of the crew to go to the forward on the boat to take the sails down or to change the sails, because it was really, really tenuous situation for a few minutes at least.
Wow.
Just in the sense of, knowing that we could keep the boat under control and safe, and that having people, I couldn't have even seen them with how hard the rain was coming down. So, if somebody's going to be on the front of the boat, I want to be able to see that they're safe and that there's nothing happening I need to be worried about. So we just sort of weathered it for 15 or 20 minutes. Mike stuck his head up at one point to check if everything was okay. Somebody apparently told him everything was okay, so he didn't come back up. And we just sort of weathered it, and then the wind came down just enough that we were able to get the crew out and make a sail change that got us back under control again, and we carried on. But that was there's been a few moments in the race since September that stand out, but that'll certainly stand out as one of the sort of spiciest experiences. And we didn't have a lot of people eager to take the helm, so I ended up staying on the helm for about 4 hours that evening just to navigate the boat through that storm. So that was I enjoy doing that, but it's a long spell on the helm to sit there for 4 hours or stand there for 4 hours.
I love this. I think when we were talking yesterday, you said that there have been a handful of moments or a handful of shifts or watches like that where and it's like there is something in your voice that is like, this is so freaking cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So intense, so focused.
Yeah, it's different because with my role on the boat, most of the time my job is to facilitate other people getting an experience, that matches what they're hoping for in terms of whether it's giving them a chance to helm the boat and mentoring them through that and coaching them through that, or setting up the crew so people have a chance to learn new roles and try new things. So I'm always facilitating other people's experiences, which often means that I don't do a lot of the sailing of the boat myself. So yeah, every once in a while when the weather really calls for it, I don't mind stepping in and getting a little bit of me time on the boat. And the crew know that. I mean, I'm a bit of an open book that way, that if they let me stay back there, I will stay back there.
You will.
But there's when the weather goes that wild, there doesn't tend to be a long lineup of people volunteering. So it was a good one. It was a good storm, and the boat, it just reminds you how well the boats are built, because the boat was perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, the sails survived a little bit of abuse, but and then the crew, did a great job. We weathered the worst of it, and then the sail change we did was one of the best ones that I think we've done since September. Just everybody was focused, everybody knew their role, and I just steered the boat and watched it all happen and didn't have to say a word, and it all was done, and we were under control very quickly. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah, there's a lot of execution being done very precisely and as needed. Wow, that's really cool. I think I guess what's coming up is just how fun. It feels like those are the moments that are really fun for you. Or well, maybe not in the moment, but looking back, it's like, oh yeah, that was.
Yeah, no, they are fun for me. People often ask me a question around what's the most terrifying or scary or words like that, and there are none of those for me. It's sort of intense moments where it calls on all of my attention and skill. But the cool thing with that is that I feel like I'm doing something that's somewhat unique to what a lot of people on the boat are able to do. So it's been one of the interesting transitions actually since September with this race, where we may have talked about this on a previous conversation, but when we started the race, I was the most experienced sailor other than Mike and Lottie, and I was more experienced than Lottie in terms of racing experience. So there was a definite role for me on the boat around sort of competence as a sailor and experience as a sailor and as a racer. And then, over the 8 months or so that we've sailed, a lot of the crew have developed into very, very competent sailors and understand the racing and the sail trim and all that. So I'm no longer unique in that way on the boat. And so it's been interesting to kind of redefine my role for myself, not expecting anybody else to do it, but just finding a different way to play a role that can support other people's experiences and still contribute to the team. And so those moments, like the one I just described, are chances to kind of go back and, and relive, there's a handful of people that you could have put on the helm that night and we would have been okay. But it's nice to be one of them, and it's nice to get those moments, because the rest of the time, like I said earlier, I go back to being a facilitator more than a doer.
Well, I mean, one of the really interesting themes of this entire race, it feels like, is, what is self-care? Like, if you can fill your cup with something like that, I bet. Well, I would be curious if that helps you in the quieter moments, or to be a better facilitator, because you have filled your cup in that way.
I think so. Yeah. I think that having those experiences every once in a while allows me to relax into the other role and not worry about how much time on the helm I'm getting. Because, I catch myself sometimes because I'm like, well, I'm a participant on this boat just like everybody else is. I should get my fair share. But the reality is, over 11 months, I will have had lots and lots of time on the helm. I've done every job on the boat there is. So I've had all of that experience. And for those that are coming on and only doing one leg, we do want to facilitate as good an experience as possible for them. So it's a bit of a balance of, making sure I get the experience I want, but also, supporting other people to do the same. Yeah.
And that feels like the crux of it, right? Like being able to understand that you have what you need, and then helping others from that place. Yeah. It's
been an interesting transition in that way, to have a role that has changed as the competency of the crew around me has changed, and to still feel like you're adding value and you're contributing on the boat. So, but I think I've done a pretty good job of finding a way to balance getting my time and supporting other people. So, still enjoying it. Still lots of, those long, slower, periods when we're just going through the motions. It's fun to watch other people learn how to sail the boat and learn new skills. And so, with my coaching background, I get as much pleasure from that as anything. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy every once in a while being tapped on the shoulder to say, deal with this.
Here you go.
And Mike said, Mike did say to me afterwards, he's like, he started off, he was going to apologize. And then I was kind of like, well, you don't need to apologize. He said, well, when I stuck my head up and asked, your crew said you had everything under control. So I went back down, and he said, and the cool thing is I felt very comfortable. I said, it felt like you had the boat under control. So, so that's nice to hear, because, I think Mike's goal all along was that eventually that his role and Lottie's role would be to sit back and just enjoy the ride. Yeah. So we're getting close. We're getting close to where they could just sit back and we could, take the boat across the ocean. So yeah, that was a cool part of this race.
As like a real thoroughly working together team, like a well-oiled machine, kind of. It's not like we're just going to sit down here and have our hot chocolate while you guys are.
Yeah, a well-oiled machine, but also a crew that would, if called on, could make the right decisions tactically and, in how we were interacting with the other boats and the weather, that we would be ready to be able to do that. And, more and more there are opportunities that Mike and Lottie give us to be involved in those decisions and to make those decisions. So, like I said, I think we're getting pretty close to the point where the two of them could sit back and just enjoy themselves. Awesome. But they're also they love to sail, they love to race, so they're motivated to be involved just like we are.
Yeah, exactly. That was just occurring to me too, that there are probably times where they really enjoy helming, they really enjoy trimming, they doing it themselves, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
very much so.
Why the hell else are you out there?
Exactly.
You don't get to do that sometimes, right? Cool. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's a pretty thorough, I feel like, investigation into this, or hearing about this leg. It's so interesting how they each have their own, I don't know, flavor or events or the things that happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Each one is definitely unique.
Yeah. Very cool.